taking advantage of them, and so are you, sir.
Dr. Megan Wood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm happy to carry on from the following speaker and respond to some of the calls from the other side, talking about how he talks to young people and his constituents are unemployed. Well, I think one of the things that, once again, Chris Arkinvale outlined very well is there's something that we can all agree on in terms of this legislation, and that is that we have a massive problem with youth unemployment. And it's actually really good to hear National finally admit that point, because we've been saying it for many years. Actually, we are at a crisis point when it comes to our young people and their ability to find work. And what we've had from members in the opposite side of the House this afternoon is crocodile tears around the rates of youth unemployment and talking about the lack of engagement of young people. But this is the only solution they've got to put up. Slashing young people's wages is not a solution to youth unemployment. It will accomplish absolutely nothing. And actually what we're having is their own members, as my colleague Sue Moroney pointed out in her very fine speech, that we've had members opposite actually give up on even advancing the arguments that this legislation will do anything to create jobs. Instead, what we're having is members fall back on telling us, don't worry, employers don't have to do it. They're one great solution, and they're reassuring the nation that it's okay, it's voluntary and employers won't have to do it. That is just ridiculous, that this is all they've got when we are at a time of national crisis in terms of youth unemployment. We have 90,000 of our young people, 90,000 young New Zealanders who are not in any form of education, employment or training. And the best they've got is voluntary wage slashing as a solution to it. It is absolutely no wonder that the Salvation Army gave this government a D, a fail, in its recent report when it came to youth employment and its ability to deal with this pressing national action. This is a government that is failing. This is a government that has absolutely nothing to offer what we have, which is at a crisis point. Of the massively high rates of unemployment that we have in New Zealand, 45% of these people are aged between 15 and 24. The unemployment rate for 15 to 19-year-olds is 30.9%. We are getting up there with the worst countries in Europe in terms of this age group and unemployment. This is not something that we can sit back and say, well, this is all we've got, but don't worry, you don't really have to do it. It's only a voluntary piece of legislation anyway. Youth unemployment is at a point where it requires a real solution. And actually, it's not only us on this side of the House that believe this. It's actually quite interesting to read back National members' comments in previous debates on this question in this House. If we go back to Paula Bennett in March 2010, in response to an oral question, who said, we are not convinced it would reduce youth unemployment, plus it would be a distraction from the really important work of improving productivity and growing the economy in order to create long-term jobs, which will keep young people in New Zealand. Fine words, Ms Bennett. We agree with you entirely. And then we come to the chair of the Select Committee that heard these submissions. These submissions, it was 61. There were 61 submissions, and 54 of those were opposed. 61. There were 531, with the majority, overwhelmingly. Only 9 out of all of those submissions were in favour. Thank you, Darian Fenton. Only 9 of those. But if we listen to what the chair of that Select Committee has previously said on the ability of youth rates to actually address this real crisis that we have in New Zealand, he says we should be promoting them, that being young people, the need to get education and training, not encouraging them to take the easy option of temporary employment, which may provide some sort of financial gain at an early age, but will not deliver long-term benefits for them to go forward as a country. Then we had David Bennett again in April 2010. It is important that we do not set the bar too low, in the sense that our young people who work hard must not find that they get no rewards for their efforts. Well, these are fine words from the chair of the Select Committee only 3 years ago. It would be great to hear him, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would be great to hear him address some of these matters more fully on this, and take a call and address some of these matters. Because the fact of the matter is, we have a government that has done very little. In fact, it has done nothing, and it has got a fail mark. We had money set aside in 2011 by this government to train young New Zealanders. In November last year, only $8 million of that Skills for Canterbury money had been spent. We lost 2 crucial years of training our young people to work in the rebuild of Canterbury. And what do we see now? That we have Christchurch being flooded, but with migrants coming in to do that work, instead of our own young people being 2 years into their training. And we have a government that is not committed. It is not backing education throughout New Zealand. We have rural polytechnics all over this country that are in real danger. Taking away the foundation course funding from them has made many of our polytechnics be in a precarious state. Labor knows that if we're going to address this real and pressing issue of youth unemployment, where 45% of all those unemployed are in New Zealand, where we have youth unemployment rates of 30%, then we have to do something other than offer voluntary legislation in terms of slashing wages. That we have to do something to create jobs. And that is what Labor is committed to doing. Labor is committed to being a hands-on government that will get out there, it will back young New Zealanders, it will say to young New Zealanders that you have a future in this country and you can stay here. Last year, in September last year, we had the Prime Minister make this great announcement and how he was personally going to write to 175 employers and ask them to take on the graduates of the limited service volunteers, where we only have 80% completion rate. Well, we have very low completion rates in the limited service volunteer courses anyway. But the Prime Minister made grand gestures. I think there was actually some unemployment figures released around the time, and the Prime Minister wanted to be seen to be doing something. Well, the Prime Minister promised to keep doing this, to follow up. As of the beginning of February this year, John Key had not done one further thing on this. The Prime Minister had not followed through on his commitment to young New Zealanders. He had written to 0 further employers asking them to take on the graduates of our limited service volunteer courses. And this all just goes to show this is a government that has no solutions when it comes to our young people. It has no solutions to tackle the real thing. All we have is insidious legislation that is only intent on cutting wages, asking our young people to live on not even the minimum wage or a living wage. It is below that. We're at a point in our history where we're debating what it is that takes someone to live on. And we're talking about $18.40 an hour. And we're asking that our young people get paid $11 an hour. This is not the kind of New Zealand that Labor wants to offer to young New Zealanders. Labor wants to offer young New Zealanders a real reason to stay here, and slashing the wages of young people will do nothing to create employment. Government members opposite have even themselves given up on that argument. We haven't heard it today, and all we're hearing of a chorus of, oh, don't worry, it's only voluntary. They don't believe in their own legislation. They know it's not going to work, and all they've got to offer now is to tell us, don't worry, not all employers will need to do it. Labor is not supporting this legislation. It is opposed to it. We want to see real solutions to the very real problem of youth unemployment, and not legislation like this coming before this House.
Chairman. Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr. Chairman, some of the arguments have been brought out very clearly by the opposition as to why this